So a little backstory before Will gets up here. There's some crime going on in our area, a lot like electricity. There's not any towns without crime. Me, Will, and Todd all and Mike had a meeting to go over what can be done, what can't be done, what are the whole steps of everything. And Will's going to share a lot about that. But as with our electric department and stuff like that, we ask you to take a step back and see the full picture before we say someone's not doing this or someone's not doing that. These guys put a lot on their line every time they go out, and just like the electric crew, they want to go home with their families every night. So Will's going to tell us kind of what's going on in our area, on a state level as well too, and just go from there. And any ideas are welcome to help make this a safer community. That's the goal for everybody here. We want it to be a community where we can, do things and feel safe, but you have to do it the right way too.
Mr. Mayor, is my mic on? No, it's not.
Is it on?
How about now?
It was on, now it's on.
One more time? Okay. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thanks so much for inviting me in to talk to you all. And thank you to the members of the public who are here. It's great to see community involvement. I know that law enforcement wants that community involvement, desires that community involvement, and it's great to see you out. What I want to talk to you all about is living in 2022 with maybe a 2012 mindset. What does that mean? Well, I want to tell you, I became the assistant DA and started working here as the DA in 2012 or so, late 2012, and I'm now the DA in 2022. And during that time, a lot of laws have changed, but I'm going to illustrate just a couple of them for you, because I want you to get the idea of how much we've changed just in the last 10 years in Colorado. One of the problems that plagues our community and all communities in Colorado, and this is not just a La Junta, Colorado issue, this is a statewide issue, it's a nationwide issue, is drugs in our communities. Back in 2012, possession of any methamphetamine, heroin, right? Cocaine, the serious drugs, those drugs of abuse we talk about, was a Class 4 felony, punishable by 2 to 6 years in prison. In 2013, that law was changed, where it made it a drug felony 4, a Class 4 drug felony, 1 being the highest, 4 being the lowest. So if you possess a small amount of methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, you could do up to a year in prison. That's changed again. In 2022, the current state of the law is that possession of methamphetamine, heroin, or cocaine is a Class 1 drug misdemeanor, punishable by 6 months to 18 months in the county jail. I think any market would respond to that kind of change, right? So if the market is from 6 years to, at worst, 18 months, the market responds. And the market has responded. We've seen a real increase in drug use in our communities. Let me also illustrate with theft. Back in 2012, it was a Class 2 misdemeanor if you stole less than $500. If you stole more than $500, but less than $1,000, it was a Class 1 misdemeanor. If you stole more than $1,000, it was a Class 4 felony. Remember what we said about that before. That's 2 to 6 years if you stole more than $1,000. And a Class 3 felony if it was $20,000 or more. Let's talk about 2022. In 2022, it is a petty offense if you steal less than $300. Punishable by 10 days in jail at the maximum. It is a Class 2 misdemeanor if you steal between $300 and $1,000 or 120 days in jail. A Class 1 misdemeanor if you steal between $1,000 and $2,000, 364 days in jail. And you don't get to the felony level until you steal between $2,000 and $5,000 in Colorado. That's a Class 6 felony punishable by up to 18 months in prison. And the numbers go up from there. But But you can see what that does for street level and petty crime in the cities. That is that lowering of consequences. Now, to give people their due, I think the big idea here was that the legislature did not want people punished or imprisoned for what they called low-level or nonviolent offenses, without really considering the knock-on effects that has on our communities. Because we, in small-town America, we live hand in glove with everyone. We don't retire to our gated communities where we don't have to deal with street-level crime. That's not how this works in our communities. But I think the folks who wrote these laws were trying to reduce overall the population in Colorado prisons. That's been a great success, by the way. They have reduced the population of Colorado prisons. But let's talk about maybe the myth that led us here. And I'm sorry to say that we saw some of that in the Junta Tribune on August 23rd, 2022. Did anyone read this article about both sides of the bars, how mass incarceration punishes families? Did anyone else read that article? Just me? Okay. All right. So some of us read that article. It was in the news section, not the opinion section. That's important to me. If you read that article, did you see any citations to studies, statistics, or anything else? You did not. You did not, because they weren't there. I looked. But that was an article lifted from folks who lobby for these kinds of laws that we've seen in Colorado. That's an article lifted straight from their website, more or less. Now, mass incarceration maybe was a problem for nonviolent drug felonies, right? Mass incarceration certainly in the 90s, 30 years ago. And we all saw that that had a disparate impact on communities of color, on lower income communities. That was an important issue that I think people wanted to address. And that is an important issue. However, if we think about people who commit crimes, is it people from gated, good communities who commit crimes? No. People who commit crimes are generally from the lower socioeconomic tiers of society. That's just the way it is. That's how crime works. But let's dispense with that for just a moment. In Colorado, fewer than 2 in 500 people are in prison. I will cite to something. This is the Department of Corrections' own statistics for 2018. You can go look them up for yourself, right? Colorado has the 26th highest incarceration rate. More than 1/5 of Colorado's prison population has been cut since 2010. So from 2010 to 2018, when these statistics were last compiled, right, more than 1/5 of that population has gone down. Over half of Colorado's prison population was convicted of violent crime. 58.7% are serving for a violent conviction. 2 in 3, so 2/3 of the people in Colorado prisons are serving time for killing, assaulting, kidnapping, or stealing from someone. And finally, in Colorado, drug-related crimes, this is in 2018, not 2022. In 2018, drug-related crimes account for less than 1 in 11 people serving sentences in Colorado prisons. So even in 2018, locking up drug offenders was not a reality in Colorado. And I'm here to tell you you can get a drug user or even a drug dealer to prison in Colorado, but they have to make it their full-time job to mess up on probation, to mess up on all the things the court tries to do for them, to mess up on treatment. And maybe you can get them to prison. But I'm here to tell you that's a problem that has been created by Colorado laws. And another thing that doesn't always help is that this overwhelming impact of these drug laws on us also increase violent crime. As you all know, the Junta PD, working with the Otero County Sheriff's Office, working with CBI, working with other agencies in Kansas, had a murder case last year that went to trial. It was a first-degree murder conviction. That was a drug-involved offense. But the headline is, from our local paper, an Ontario County jury convicted a Garden City, Kansas man of first-degree murder of a La Junta man last Tuesday, bringing justice to a case that went unsolved for over a year. Now, Chief, maybe I got this. I think it was day 3. We had the suspect identified and in custody. Is that right? So that wasn't unsolved for more than a year. That was solved for the good, hard work of your police department working with multiple agencies across 2 states. So that's what they are doing. They're working on those cases, and they're working drug cases. I know they're working drug cases because they come and talk to me about warrants. But we don't get a lot of bang for our buck for those anymore. The other thing that impacts, I think, street-level crimes is the lowering of bonds throughout the state. Since 2012, there have been 2 bond reform measures passed, which means that judges do not set high bonds, particularly for low-level crimes, for thefts, for drug use. Folks are often given PR bonds, sometimes at the jail. And the bond schedule is published. You can go look that up. It's a published bond schedule for the 16th Judicial District.
Explain the PR bonds for people that don't.
PR bond, sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A PR bond is a personal recognizance bond. That means you sign a piece of paper and say, yes, indeed, I will show up to court. No cash posted. So remember when we were talking about that petty offense for theft of less than $300? That's a PR bond as soon as they hit the jail, every time. So, when you think, well, that guy just stole from me, and now I see him out walking the street. Well, that's because we have a PR bond, mandated by statute, by the way. Some of that is mandated by statute, some of that is set by our local judiciary, but most of that is mandated by statute. So again, laws written in Denver that have a severe impact on our community. So I would encourage you all to look at the bond schedule, but that doesn't stop there. As soon as they have a bond set, they still get to talk to the judge to see if their bond can be lowered. And they all fill out what's called their attorney fills out for them what's called a pretrial assessment tool, where they're categorized by such questions as, are you currently employed? Do you currently believe you have a problem with alcohol or drugs? How's everyone going to answer that? Right? Right. Well, again, okay. But you're honest.
It's employment.
How long ago was your most recent arrest? Have you ever been arrested before? Have you ever failed to return for a scheduled court date? Now, luckily, we can look that up and tell the court how many times they have or haven't appeared. Do you have other pending cases? Are there any active warrants? And based on those questions, they have a little score. So even someone who maybe came into someone's house could have a very low score and be granted a PR bond. And again, this system is part of the statutes and it's part of the scoring instrument used by our courts. So that's a challenge, again, to keeping people off the street who are committing low-level crimes. And let's say we get someone into prison. Okay? We recently sentenced someone to 6 years in prison who was the accessory to this murder we've talked about. Okay? The family received notice. That was the maximum sentence under the presumptive range, by the way. But she gets 6 years in prison. She was sentenced about 4 months ago. She spent some time in custody prior to trial. Last week, the family got notice that DOC wants to send her to a halfway house. So when we talk about putting someone in prison, the policies set by the governor and his director of prisons also have a big effect on how long someone stays there. So all of these policies are being set by the folks up in Denver again. One more thing, and then we'll talk about maybe some solutions. how we as citizens in our small towns can maybe change the landscape of our small towns. Many of you may remember George Floyd and Elijah McClain from a couple of years ago. We all remember those cases. They were horrible tragedies, no doubt. In response to those horrible tragedies, our Senate passed Senate Bill 2217. Did everyone recall that? So what did this do? This changed what law enforcement officers could do in terms of arrest control, in terms of responding. It stripped away from them qualified immunity. Qualified immunity, do we know what that is?
No.
It means that if you're doing your job as a police officer, you can't be sued. It's qualified immunity. It stripped portions of that away from law enforcement officers. There is, without a doubt, nationwide and somewhat in Colorado, a negative attitude. I know not here, right? I know not here. But nationwide, a negative attitude towards law enforcement. And I can tell you, I had long talks with individual officers. I went around and spoke with all of our agencies, the sister agencies, Otero County. I spoke with La Junta PD. I spoke with other law enforcement agencies, Crowley County, Bent County, about this law and how it would impact the individual officers and how they could protect themselves. So what effect do we think that has on hiring quality candidates who want to be police officers? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's not good. It's not a good thing because it doesn't attract people who want to do the right thing and who are also mindful. Because the mindful person is going to say, well, it's a thankless job. The community's not behind me. Oh, and by the way, I can be sued. Now, thankfully, we were able to talk to individual officers and keep some of them, but we lost some because of that law. Made, I'm sure, with good intentions, again. I'm sure made with the very best of intentions. But what it does do is depress the pool of willing, hard-minded applicants who want to be police officers. Now, as far as solutions are concerned, I would tell you that law enforcement is not omniscient. They don't know everything that's going on in your neighborhood or your community. They don't know that there's a drug house 2 houses down because they are responding to other calls all day long. And, by the way, if you're unsure of that, I would invite anyone to do a ride-along with these folks. They work hard, and they're working hard every day, and they're responding to calls from there's a stray dog to we just had a shots fired call. In fact, the very first Axon Betty, you know everyone wears cameras now, right? All our police officers, it's great. It's such a great tool for myself as a district attorney and for the public to be able to see what a fine job these gentlemen do out there. Because you'll see that they treat people respectfully, you will see that they treat people with dignity, and you'll see them working hard. So the very first Axon body camera we had from this murder was Anthony Avila. He was at a dog at large call. He was at a dog at large call. And he responded directly from that dog at large call to a murder scene. Just like that. We don't have specialized units. We don't have a special victims unit here. We get a lot of help from CBI and state agencies, but these guys are out there working. So I invite you to go on a ride-along. It's a great experience. I would invite you to attend a Citizens Academy so that you can understand the laws of the state of Colorado. I would invite you to organize neighborhood watches. There used to be some fairly organized neighborhood watches, I think in the 90s, if people recall. In the late 80s and early 90s, here in Junta, and I know in Rocky Ford, they had pretty good organized neighborhood watches. And if nothing else, know your neighbors. I know all my neighbors. I'm a nosy neighbor. You can believe it. I've had my tires slashed, right? I would have liked to have known who did that. But we want to know our neighbors. We want to get involved with our community. We don't want to sit in our houses and sit on our phones. We want to get to know our neighbors, get involved with the police. They could use the help, and we could all use the help. And it's involved citizens being good witnesses, taking good notes, and helping the community that I think can turn this around. Because the fact of the matter is, I don't see the tenor of Denver changing. I don't see the bolder influx of law writers, right? The folks who actually write the laws. I don't see that changing. But what we can do is be involved and be good citizens and call in when we see something. And you may see a suspicious person walking down the street, and you'll see a police officer go up and talk to that person. You go, doggone it, why didn't they pick that person up? Well, they may not have picked him up, but they made contact. And that person knows that the police is looking at them. That person knows that that neighborhood is not a safe neighborhood to walk down and maybe look in car windows. So community involvement is the key, and I'm really pleased to see the community here. I know I talked to Randall about one special project near and dear to my heart. I don't want to talk about it here in an open forum, but really appreciate his enthusiasm for that project. And thank you all for giving me a moment to speak with you about this, because I can tell you from my perspective, responsiveness, the hard work and dedication that the Lahana police officers show on a daily basis, it's one of the best agencies we work with at the DA's office.
I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
When you state the community involvement to be a good witness and take good notes, now, like with the fireworks situation every July, if the police officers don't see it, there's nothing they can do about it. But it was stated that, like myself as a neighbor, if I saw it, I could take that person to court. Would that be the same
Here's where I'm going to tap out. Fireworks ordinances,
or different?
not my bailiwick.
But to be a good witness and to get good information in order to turn it over
Sure.
to the police department, then they could do something with
Sure,
that.
absolutely. So they could say, I saw the Culver boys, my 13-year-old and 17-year-old, right, out there shooting off fireworks, even though we know that there's an ordinance against it, right? They didn't. They were very upset by this, by the way. There were many conversations about why the DA can't have his kids violate the law. But we had a lot of long, heartfelt conversations. But let's say someone did see my boys out there shooting off fireworks. They say, I see those, the redheaded and the blonde one out there shooting off fireworks right out there in the street at this time, at this date, at this address. And they could certainly take that into the police. But yeah. Yes, sir.
Several decades ago, they used to have a program called Just Say No. That was just for all kinds of drugs. Usually it was marijuana. Has anybody approached you about the value of that or starting something new? Because we agree with you that drugs is the big problem, the issue here.
Yeah.
It's permeating the schools just crazy, and it makes the job more difficult for the teachers and such.
Thank you. I know there used to be a DARE program in the Arkansas Valley, and that may still be existent, so that's a good thing to look into. That's a good community-based program. Just Say No, unfortunately, I think, is actually something that works. It's actually a good slogan, but it's been so vilified in the press, I don't know that it would be useful anymore. But I would say there is a DARE program. I think there might still be some monies out there in that program, but that's one thing to look into and talk to a DARE coordinator.
Thank you, first and foremost. Now, you mentioned all these time frames for different drug violations and stuff like that. That's best case scenario, right? That's if we have a witness. That's if we have some kind of camera operating on it. Then we can get that kind of stuff. And the majority of these cases, we don't have that.
No, let me, and that's a good question. Let's talk about that for a moment. You're right to point that out. We have, let's say you have, perfect. We see a hand-to-hand transfer, drugs from one hand from the dealer, right, to the person who's buying the drugs. It's all captured on video or on camera. Let's talk about step one. How do we capture that on video or on camera? For us, as law enforcement, there's this very important concept called the Fourth Amendment, right? So we have to very carefully make sure that we are either out in the public, or we have a warrant to view that transaction, or We have an undercover person, a confidential informant, to view that transaction. The drugs, of course, have to be sent out to be tested to CBI. That's an additional expense. Worth it. But best case scenario, let's say we get the dealer, we get conviction, and we go to trial, we make no offers. The presumptive range for someone who's dealing methamphetamine or heroin in your community is between 2 and 4 years.
In a perfect case.
In a perfect case. In a perfect case. And as we all just learned, what that means is when they go to DOC, let's say they get 6 years. Based on what I've heard from DOC, as soon as they walk in the door, 3 years come off the top. So that's 3 years. And then they can work their way to 1.5 years on a 6-year sentence. Sure, go ahead.
So, I want to work with you guys, small business owner, half the people out there know me. I'm hearing a conflict in this. So, as a business owner, as a property owner, we organize a neighborhood watch. We get together, we catch this scenario on 4K television. We got 3 witnesses saying there. We deliver it all to you. The police officers are going to review it. The police officers are going to decide, most likely, not to even bother pressing charges because the individual is going to be, at the very best case scenario, as you said, OR'd. They're going to get a PR bond. So even before, if somewhere down the road you could get them in a trial, you could get this, they're going to be PR'd. They have 5 previous PRs, failure to appears. They just let them go.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I agree.
So what do we gain as a neighborhood watch? If I call you, and I've done it, if I call the Hunter Police Department with a stolen vehicle in my possession with the person driving it, and Andrew Hayden says, tell the driver to fix it, and I quote, fix it, what more can we do? In that situation, a recovered stolen vehicle was released to the person driving it. I called State Patrol. State Patrol went and arrested the individual, picked up the truck after Andrew Hayden, and I quote, said, fix it.
I'm not going to discuss current cases.
Right. Well, there was no case on that when it was dropped. But as a property owner, I deliver 4K surveillance. In my experience, nothing is done with it. And on your statement today, you said if all that is done, the individual will be PR'd based on Colorado law. So what do we gain from us working together as a neighborhood watch? I know my neighbors. They're also fellow property owners. They're also fellow landlords who are losing a small fortune to these meth heads, these drug addicts, these drug dealers. They break in the house, they set the carpet on fire to cook their drugs, and the police can't do anything about it.
So again, I can't comment on current cases, and we're getting pretty close to
Right,
this.
What would you like Randall and I, as property owners, as neighborhood, if you and I start a neighborhood watch, I deliver you 4K video footage, I deliver them to you in the house, and don't take that personally, I deliver them to our Colorado government, our Colorado legislative. They're going to be PR'd. It doesn't matter. They're going to be PR'd. They're going to disappear. They're going to failure to appear. They're going to get maybe they get rearrested. They're going to get PR'd again, over and over and over. I've been on both sides of that legal system. I know your hands are tied. But how can we come to you? I think all of us need to get together to figure out some active. A neighborhood watch worked in 2012. But in 2012, from your statistics, everybody did not get a PR bond. I call them an OR. It was own recognizance in when I'm used to in other states.
Yeah.
A PR bond, if you were a felony in flight, you were automatically disqualified in 2012. At least in 2002, 2004 you were. Now that Colorado's done away with that, us watching will not help. We need a leader. We need a police officer. We need somebody that can guide us with ideas that we can do legally. Because as a property owner, if we go grab him by the neck like you would in 2002, grab him by the neck, take him out the street corner and throw him on the street, when you get the property owner gets arrested. we get menacing charges, or we get criminal mischief charges. Where the drug offender won't, we own property. We don't, yeah, we get a PR. We probably just get a summons. $10,000 in lawyer fees, 6 months in trial. Where the drug offender who was doing damage to our stuff gets nothing. As a property owner, as a citizen, I am more than willing to volunteer to be higher up in some program. I'm more than willing to help lead a neighborhood watch. I know that a couple property owners that I have talked to have the temperament that we should not be the first one in charge. Because you can't steal 4 cars from me and me keep saying it's okay, you can have it. And I personally have recovered 4 stolen vehicles in the valley. Of those 4, no one was arrested, but at least I got the cars back. Well,
So I've given you my suggestions, and I think a neighborhood watch is a good suggestion. I'd love to see the case where we have 4K video. I would love to see community involvement, and you know, our doors are open too. So again, I can't comment on specific cases, and I wouldn't. That's against my rules of ethics. I'd be disbarred, right?
Correct.
But what I would tell you is that we've got an open door. The police department has an open door. The sheriff's department has an open door. And they're willing to work with you, work with the neighborhood watch. And you're right, temperament's important. You'd be amazed to watch some of these body cam videos and the things that people say to our officers and how cool and calm and collected they are. Temperament is important. So.
Will, is there a number of PR bonds that they can get?
So in general, yes. I mean, if you have a PR bond, you don't show up, then you're going to get a cash bond in general. If you repeatedly don't show up, you can work your way to not getting a bond, to just being held without bond.
Is it quite a bit that you get?
Yeah, you have to work pretty hard about that. You know, you have to really work hard at not showing up to court. Just this last week, I saw a couple of folks who were, again, violated probation, worked their way into the system as hard as they possibly could, and the judge put them in with no bond. Hallelujah. So we were glad to see that. But
It can happen. And so, for real quick, for Todd and Mike and our PD, they could be making arrests and for specific crimes, and these people can be getting out on PR bonds, and it seems like nothing has happened to them, and they're just walking the streets all the time.
that's correct.
Okay. Cassandra?
Yeah, so I do have a couple specific questions. I'm not sure if they would be more for you or for possibly the city attorney. But I want to preface a couple things first. When the Floyd situation was going on, that was one piece of crap cop. I have respect for police officers, and I didn't know what else to do. I bought all the cops and the fire department gift cards for coffee. I didn't know what to do, but I wanted to let somebody know that I appreciated their job. A couple years before my husband was kind of forced to retire because Homeland Security thought it was more important to protect Social Security office from terrorists than it was to patrol our streets for drugs. He was the narcotics officer. I told him a couple years before he retired, he didn't get the memo. The courts decided not to send anybody to prison, and his job was futile. I mean, it's just completely worthless. I understand that we need to go up higher on the food chain and talk to state legislators. I didn't know prison systems had anything to do with making decisions, so now there's a whole nother set of letters I'm writing every year, not just to our state representatives. But I understand that your office has to follow the state statutes. What about the city of Lahaina? We have municipal codes. The state doesn't care how many dogs we allow in your home, or different city municipal laws. Can't we, as a community, start enforcing things like vagrancy and public intoxication? Those are on the books. I'm not asking for anybody to create new laws, but if we're kind of getting our hands tied by what the state is saying we don't want to mess with anymore, can't us as a community say, well, guess what? we're putting some things on our books. And if you want to go ahead and sell drugs, even if it's just one joint, I don't even know if they call them that anymore, and the state doesn't want to do anything to you, then fine, move along. Get on down the road, because in Lahana, you do that, we're going to put you in jail.
Let me circle back to a couple of things you're talking about there. One is creating an environment where, I'm paraphrasing, but an environment where people who are doing those sorts of things don't feel welcome. Okay, I think La Junta can do that. There are certain parts of the law that the state occupies the field, like drug laws, right? So La Junta can't put in their own drug laws that are more strict.
Why?
Because the state occupies the field, supremacy, right? Just like the United States controls immigration. They occupy that field. Colorado cannot, because the United States has supremacy in their laws over the state laws with regard to immigration.
You didn't do that with marijuana in the state. The feds are still calling it, you're breaking the federal law, and the state is saying we don't care.
Oh, I agree. I'm not telling you it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense in 2012. But in 2022, things are very different. And I don't know why the federal government has gone away from the field as far as marijuana is concerned. I couldn't tell you the answer to that. But there are certain things. Would they come both feet down on La Junta if La Junta tried to enforce their own drug code? Yes, they would.
Who would?
The state would.
State.
They would. The AG's
Okay.
office would shut them down. in a
And
heartbeat.
so can we create a fund for lawyers and let's test it?
It would never win. I would tell you you would lose that every single time, 100 out of 100. That's not a winning argument.
Okay, does the city have a law about vagrancy, loitering?
I think we still have a law against spitting in the sidewalk.
Antiquated or not, is it on the books? Can we enforce it?
I don't know if it is or not. We can enforce it, I guess, if it's still on the books.
There's been a sea change.
Under COVID-19 rationale.
Well, but I mean, public intoxication doesn't mean that they're drunk from alcohol. They could be intoxicated from anything, and if it's against the municipal code, then we don't have to worry about the state. We can not let them out on their own recognizances.
Is municipal jail, Todd? No.
Wouldn't that be the county?
No, the state, and we probably should wait for Dean to talk about this, but has done away with getting arrested. They're trying to get rid of community courts altogether.
Yeah.
Oh, so I need to write a letter to Dean also. Okay.
Well, I don't think that's Dean's fault. They're trying to do away with
Trying
it.
to stop them from, offending worse and getting into the big places is mainly what that's for. Other than some of the code things like you're talking about, weed, stuff like that.
But code enforcement, I think that's I know something Todd's been working on quite a bit.
And just to kind of tie this a little bit together on the muni side, the recent vandalism with the spray painting. Sorry, Zeke, not
No.
your artwork.
Just a little clue in on that. We are hoping to alleviate that problem. I did take one of the gentlemen who was responsible for that, and I did give him an out, and I told him personally that I would be there for him anytime he thought that he needed an out to do that. Come and talk to me. I would be more than happy to get him a place where he could do that on a legitimate scale rather than doing it to other people's property and vandalizing stuff. So hopefully a positive comes out of that whole ordeal as well.
I hope so too. But on that note, if we can't do anything on a serious offense like drugs or theft, think of how hard that's going to be on things like this. It affects our community. It's hard on our community. But what would that damage have to be, Todd, to even do?
If we can get enough of them put together, we are going criminal mischief through county. But
And the best case scenario for that is what?
Well, criminal mischief, likewise. Criminal mischief just means they broke something apart, defaced something, destroyed something. Criminal mischief has similar dollar amounts that we just talked about with theft. Okay, so again, that's a tiered basis. I didn't write those down.
Yeah,
I
but
don't have them on
it's
that.
probably maybe.
Right.
2022, the LVP
Yeah.
So, I mean, realistically, it doesn't matter what the worst case, because in reality, they'll be PR.
Well, I would say this, and I hear you, and I agree, and I'm with you frustration-wise. Okay, but building someone's resume with convictions, building their resume with not showing up to court, building their resume with street-level crimes does help me down the road to put away those folks who have shown themselves to be truly violent, to be burglars. That's the sort of thing that does help. And you're right, but it's a long game. This is a long game.
It's an expensive long game for
Yeah.
us property owners.
Yeah, it is. I agree. It's frustrating, but it's a long game.
Does anyone else have questions for Will? Todd, can you come up real quick? Thank you, Will.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you all.
Actually, I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So, with all the drug offenses and stuff like that, and I know that there's some public services that they have to do, how often and where are these? I mean, are these people actually complying with the public service and so forth?
I mean, some do. They have a drug court, which is, I think, helpful for some people. Judge McDonald runs that. So people who have immediate consequences, if they pop pot, they maybe spend the weekend in jail, immediate consequences, and some of those folks come out the other side clean and working. But no, I mean, with the downside being so low, 6 to 18 months in jail, I mean, if someone's in the grips of that addiction, 6 to 18 months in jail is nothing. I mean, that's 3 hots in a cot and getting themselves healthy again so that when they get out, they get to use some more.
Oh.
I mean,
One other question I had, and I was reading the House Bill 19-1263, and in there it talks about the drug offender that fails to report and comply with the court order to be fingerprinted and have their photographs ID, that they could be held in contempt of court. Are we actually prosecuting and holding people in contempt of court for not
that's one thing they generally
complying
do.
with that?
Yeah, no, that's something they all do. And they go and take the order, get fingerprinted and ID. So that part they generally do. I've not seen I've seen people jailed briefly until their fingerprints and picture are taken.
So then when people do report, say somebody's drugging and doing these things, they have access, the police have access to those people's photographs and fingerprinting because they're in the system then.
Sure. Yeah. All these folks, I mean, you probably know this already, but 5% of the citizens are responsible for 90% of the calls. 95% of the calls.
What is the percentage of plea bargains that your office does?
Very high. I mean, most cases are plea bargain.
And what is the rationale? Just to have something, or?
Because you can't try them all. I've personally spent more days in jury trial than any attorney in the 16th Judicial District or the 15th Judicial District, but you can't try them all. And generally the ones that get tried are the very serious ones.
Do you have a criteria?
No.
No.
It's make a plea agreement or you don't. And I've tried minor cases, I've tried major cases. No criteria.
You need more assistance anyway, don't you?
Everyone does in this arena, but I'm not complaining about that today.
Mr. Culver, I want to make sure that, I don't believe I'm misunderstanding some of your words, but I want to make sure that the listening audience isn't misinterpreting something. When you were explaining that, they get picked up with this, and it's kind of like we have to go through all this, and then they get, 3 hots in a cot, and then they get out, and then they just go back to using. You're not saying that why bother because it's not going to change anything, right? I don't believe you're saying that, but I want to make sure that it's clear that.
No, thank you. I'm not saying that at all.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, because I want to disrupt their life as much as possible.
it does disrupt their life, but in my shoes, right?
Yeah.
6 to 18 months in jail that would be life altering for me,
Right.
And as I suspect it would be for almost anyone in this room.
But most likely the people that are enthralled in the drugs and having to steal and rob and do other illegal activity to get the money for those things, they don't have anything that they're looking forward to in their life anyway.
Right.
I mean, the reason why I don't hit some people is because I have stuff I want to keep. So
I agree.
mean, I mean, they just don't have a life that we would consider
Right.
valuable.
Right.
So they don't care. But I want to disrupt their life, and I want them out of my neighborhood for at least then I have, 6 to 18 months of peace.
Right, and I agree with you, and hopefully we can do that. So that is a value. It's not a huge.
If they're vagrants, do we have a fund where we can give them a bus ticket somewhere else?
No.
Can I start a fund?
Vagrancy is tough, and I'm sure you've talked about this with your city attorney a good deal. Vagrancy laws are coming under attack, big time. So that's probably a civil quagmire you want to discuss with your city attorney before thinking about enforcing those.
Okay, so because we're afraid of somebody getting their feelings hurt or us being called something that we're not,
No.
then we don't want to push any legal issues against somebody that's doing harm to our community because we're afraid that they'll sue us?
Well, yeah, you're afraid of a Section 1983 suit in U.S. District Court.
I can put into a fund for lawyers if the town needs it?
Me too.
Well, that's a great idea. If
Well,
you're,
I got it here. I'm going to send a letter to Dean.
Something you said at our meeting, Will,
I'm sorry?
is something you said at our meeting is you said we enforce the law as it is, not as it ought to be. And that's what your main thing was that stuck with me. And there's a lot of things we don't agree with the current law, but we can't just take it into our own hands and say it should be this way.
That's correct. I mean, law enforcement in our office enforces the law as it is, not as we hope or wish it were. That's how it works. And the laws get written in Denver, right? Not here. But I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged to see this many citizens out. That's great. I think that's super encouraging.
We can set up another thing and maybe do a more open thing in the future.
What? Sorry to take up so much time.
No,
No, it was great.
Dean's gone, so we had to fill that void. No. Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time and
Thank you.
Chief Quick. Will gave a great presentation, and he touched briefly on a thing called the Citizens Academy. If you wouldn't mind just going over what that is, when we can expect another one, and then do what we need as far as reserve-wise.
Sure. I want to start off first, though, about talking about... I'm sorry. Is this better? I want to start out... I was born and raised here in Lahana and Shiraw. I was a victim of crime, is why I became a police officer. So I know what it feels like. Mike Ingebret's been a victim of crime. We are not immune to crime either. We care about this community, and we are doing the best we have, or what we have with what we can do and within the law. We do care about this community, and we want to make it a better place to live. So with that said, now I'll answer Joe's question. Yes, we're going to have a Citizens Academy. That's usually, we might cut it down to 6 weeks. It's usually 12 weeks. When we do it in 12 weeks, we meet one night a week. If we cut it down to 6 weeks, we'll do 2 nights a week. You come in, there's no cost to you. You hear from different officers on different parts of their job, the SRO, reserves. Will doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to ask him to come in and give something similar to what he did there, which I think is very good. So it's a great way to inform the community. That is one way I got Mr. Mayor to listen to some of the stuff we had to say. Not to say that you didn't ever listen, but being a young guy, he come in and thought, wow, I didn't realize that's what all the stuff you have to do. Bob Benz, can you come up just a second? I don't want to embarrass Bob. We're going to talk about reserves. Bob's one of the longest serving reserves we've had in Lahana. Because of knowing Bob, he talked me into getting into reserves, and that was my start into law enforcement. Come in, volunteer. So I'm just going to have Bob talk about it in a minute, and then I'll go about an academy. So tell them about what we can use.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. What brought me to Lahana to start with was the United States Air Force. This was my first duty assignment and my last duty assignment. So I spent 20 years in the military. Part of that time, I got involved with the Lahana Police Reserves. So I spent 28 years giving up Friday nights Saturdays to help the community. Okay, the police reserves are a true helping hand to the police department. Not only do they ride with the officers, they can help them, doing their daily tasks. Really very rewarding to work with the citizens of Lahaina and so forth. During its prime, we had anywhere from 15 to 20 reserve officers. That equates to almost doubling the force. Right now, I believe you have three reserves, and how many full-time regulars? 14?
When we're full staff, it would be 16, but we're down to like 14.
So that basically doubles the force. So that's a big helping hand for the police department. Really what we need to do, or one of the solutions that will help, is if we can get citizen involvement, people that might want to be police reserve officers. It doesn't mean you make a career out of it or anything. You do have to attend a reserve academy. The academy is fairly long. You have to qualify in various skill sets, arrest and control, firearms, driving, and so forth. But that is a way to give back to your community, and I fully support that. I think it has helped Lahaina, and I think it'll help Lahaina again if we can get that program going.
So they're an excellent force multiplier. Young people like me that decide, hey, I might want to make a career out of this. Mike Ingebrett back there, he started out as a reserve force and became full-time. We used to have quite a few on the department that started as reserves. One of the projects we're working on is trying to hire local people that want to stay here and just don't move on. So for your reserve question, Mr. Mayor, we are trying to get an academy together, and it should start January or February. It's going to be 4 to 5 months long. In order to be considered for a reserve, you'll have to come in, take some basic aptitude tests that are required. You'll have to go get a psychological exam and a physical and a drug test. All that will be paid for by the department. Once you've passed all that, then we start the training. And it's usually a couple nights a week for 3 to 4 hours, and then quite a few weekends for your skills that Bob talked about, your firearms, your arrest control, and driving. There is no age limit on it. I don't know if any of you around here have been here long enough to remember Bob Cody. He retired at 81 years old from the reserves. He was one of the very first reserves in Lahaina and the very first reserve unit. I still have a SAP that you were issued and could carry back then. We can't hit people with a SAP anymore. Those are outlawed. I have it just for, nostalgia.
Cassandra will start a fund to keep that going again.
Yeah. When they started the reserve program, they were better trained than the police officers. Their academy was 2 weeks long, and the police officers back then had a week of training. So, but they're a very important function to this city. A lot of bigger agencies don't like them because then they believe money, and which may be true in big cities, I don't know, money is cut from their budgets because they have volunteers helping. We need it. It helps us get people in cars on weekends. When we have our functions in town, we have to have parades and stuff like that. We get those people out there and help with traffic control. So they're a great help. When we have a big scene, they can come in and be perimeter and help us out there. One of the reserves we have now is a former police officer, so he could actually do some police work if he has to. But we try to keep him from doing that because they're not paid. So, but they are a force multiplier and they help.
And then last thing for you, Todd, is the City of Lahaina Police Department, is drugs a big deal to it?
Absolutely. Like I said, we live here. This is part of our town. Our kids go to school here. We're not like a lot of places where your officers live. I'll give you Fountain, for example. Their officers can live in Pueblo, Colorado. They're not part of their community. We have one officer that lives in Rocky Ford, and the only reason we allow him to do that is because he already has a house there and family there. But the rest of ours are, Lahaina men and women, and we think that's what's going to help keep a better force here down the road.
Yeah, and I knew the answer to that question, but I want everyone to know that drugs, crime, everything is important to this police department.
Absolutely.
There's not a lax attitude. These guys are going out and protecting and serving each and every day, and their main goal is to come home to their families.
Yes.
And I respect them, and I appreciate everything you do for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question?
Sure.
Sorry. So with that law about, how individual officers can be sued personally for doing their job, I think they should be able to be sued civilly if they've done something wrong, but just for doing their job, like that Floyd case. I mean, that guy's in prison. That's where he should be.
Mm-hmm.
Do the officers? Is there a liability insurance company that covers officers?
There is for legal defense, but not to cover that cost. So that would be the problem.
But I mean, is there a policy that your individual officers can purchase themselves?
Maybe through their homeowners. I do purchase one through my homeowners, but there's nothing that I'm aware about there just for that.
Just for law enforcement?
Yeah.
I mean, okay.
And to give you an example, I'm involved in a lawsuit with 2 former officers and a former Bent County sheriff on a drug dealer we took down. He's suing us. I can't say a whole lot about it because going to court, but he's suing us personally and not even suing the city, thinking he's going to get that $25,000. It's going to be a frivolous lawsuit, and more than likely we'll win, but you still have to go through that.
Sure, yeah. Well, the stress of it.
But
I got sued in that one.
oh yeah, Will's involved too.
So, I mean, what is there like a cap of 25,000 or?
That we can be sued for, and then they can go after the city, the county.
Okay, but like the individual officers, that law changed to where it could open them up to where the individual officer could be responsible for 25,000.
Yes.
Up to. And so, like you personally, you have it on your homeowner's policy that covers that. Do the other officers know about that there's that policy, or?
Yes, that's one of the first things we talk to them about in the academy. Number one, get your legal defense. Even if you screw up, legal defense covers you.
Yeah, and
So-
but that is that through the fraternity of brotherhood or
The
whatever
legal
it's called?
defense is through either FOP, a Fraternal Order of Police, or the Colorado Police Protective Association. Those
And
are
is
the
that
2.
something that the police department provides to its officers?
No.
Or the officer has to purchase on his own?
They purchase it on their own.
Do you have an idea of what that costs?
Depending on what amount of service they want, I think the highest is $50 or $60 a year. The lowest, 20, something like that.
Okay.
It's not.
How many officers do you have?
When we're fully staffed, we should have 16.
16?
Yeah.
How many do you have now?
Right now, we have 2 in code enforcement that'll be going to the academy. So right now we're just 2 down. So we have a total of 14. But actual police officers, working the street that are certified to 12. And Mike and I are 2 of those. So we have a lot of other things we have to do as well as try to help out on the street.
Can I have just a couple of minutes?
1.
Okay, I'm not even start then. So, I got involved in this. I got experience with this in the last couple of months, and it's like I woke up in a third world country when I started having the laws explained to me and misdemeanor offenses and people publicly intox and acting like idiots and doing things. It was just, and I was a little upset. Didn't yell, didn't call anybody names, but I was a little upset, as anybody that knows me very well can imagine. What I've come out of this thing, and I did the ride along with Officer Brzezinski on a Sunday afternoon. He showed me on his little screen that they had 17,900 something calls. You can't imagine. I mean, it's a big. At least half of the job is babysitting people who ought to know better, and that's the problem. So, after my experience in this amount of time, my recommendation, I can tell you what I'm going to be doing is doubling up on my cameras, both at home and here, because essentially they don't have the time. When you start looking, they have to account for every minute that they're out patrolling around, or if they're having a conversation with somebody, they got to turn the body cam on. Then if it's an incident, they got to upload the body cam, then they got to make a report and do all that, and they're traveling all over town at the same time doing that. So it was an eye-opener. So what I'm telling everybody here, and I'm not done yet, but my experience is get your cameras, get really good cameras, get your evidence, build your own case, and then you certainly let the police know what you're doing. But for them to have a camera and get set up, they've got to have Will's approval to have enough activity someplace to get that. We don't. We can't point a camera right in at somebody's house. And I'm not giving legal advice, but there's certain places like where I'm starting to cover from the back of my building for graffiti. It's going to take a little wider cast on things and that, and take into as much information that I can get, and I'm going to be watching that and trying to accumulate evidence, and then I'm going to try to work on behalf. And you can bet when they need somebody to testify, I'm going to be pointing fingers at somebody. I'm sick and tired of these people. And where this all comes from, if you guys haven't put two and two together, whether you're a believer in God or not, it came back when they told us to stop whipping our children. And now we got a bunch of kids who are grown-up adults that need whipped, and they're taking the laws away from us. Because all they've got, they don't have anything. All they've got is their freedom. You take away that for a year. What's it worth? Not much. Not much, and then they're back out doing their stuff again. So it's a ridiculous, this world, and I think everybody's seen it, particularly believers, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out we're going downhill. And yeah, maybe the governments are saving money, but they're giving it away to somebody. Maybe probably the drug abusers is drawing some kind of welfare check out there anyway. So
Randall.
It's just a.
I'm
telling you, that's where.
That's over the 1 minute. Okay.
All right.
Wrap it up.
But I want to have my 2 cents worth in there because there was a disconnect from what you guys knew in law enforcement and you knew at the DA's office and what we knew in the public. So this is a really, really good meeting. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to explain it, but that was a wake-up call for me because I didn't have a clue until this thing started going south on me. So thanks for everybody that came.
Randall brought up a point I want to talk about too. Fireworks. We've got lots of video. You come and you watch the video and you see like a flicker of a fire, then you see some sparks and it goes up. You don't see who lit it, and I got it right there. It is on film. Well, did you see who did it? No. Can you identify him? No, but I've got it filmed. So we've got to be able to see the person that did it, know who they are, at least be able to point them out to us, and then be willing to testify in court. So remember that. So that's one of the biggest problems we've seen with the fireworks. We got lots of real dark video with a flicker of a lighter and some sparks going off, but you never
Or
see the
staff,
person.
that they're wearing a mask, they're wearing this and that.
Yeah.
Anyone else have questions for Todd? Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone, for coming out.